Welcome to The Curious Developer. I'm Jesper Peterson from KDAB, and we're in the middle of a mini-series trying to figure out how assisted, that is AI-assisted development works. And one of the things that we'll talk about in this episode is how do you host your own models? And by now, Jan is already waiting to hear about my latest stream, but I slept like a baby last night, so you'll have to take it from there. So Jan, it's so good to see you again. How are you doing?
Hi Jesper, I'm doing fine, and I'm also very happy to hear that you finally had a good night's sleep.
I did. And I'm just wondering, there is this whole thing with secrets or security around my own data, and if that's uploaded to some evil empire, whether it's on one side or the other side of the pond, I don't know. But in any case, uploading my customers' data is not good. We can host our own models, but how easy is that? Can you get me an insight into that?
Yes, gladly. So there is an open source tool that's called Ollama that has become kind of the industry standard for quick and dirty, maybe self-hosting setups. And this is a tool that starts a server, and then you can interact with that server, and you can ask the server to download models from other servers on the internet. And that server will then coordinate which model to load onto the GPU right now, which GPUs are actually available for loading models onto, and then it will offer an API that people or that clients can use to chat with. So it's basically hosting your own tool or your own LLM available, or different LLMs available to services.
You gotta love that idea. So it's a server that you ask question and it'll download models if it doesn't have them. So dear KDAB server, can you tell me what token would be good completion here? It's like, wait a minute, let me just download 1 terabyte of data. Or how big are these models?
Well, that really depends on the specific model you're looking at, but gigabytes is definitely a good measure.
Okay. Fair enough. So hopefully they have been downloaded before querying. But what does it then? So will I have these services running on my own silicon in a data center, or how does this work?
So for self-hosting, and if we look at the Ollama use case, then you would maybe have so maybe I talk about the use case that we have at KDAB at the moment, right? So we have one server in a rack that's sitting in our data center, which is in our office, so it's like a server room there. And this server has 2 GPUs, like NVIDIA GPUs, customer grade at the moment. And this is a Linux server that people that want to do some LLM work log into, and then they can run their training, or they can also just run LLMs for inference, meaning to ask questions to.
But then if that's, hosting my own computers is not going to scale up. We're 100 people in KDAB, and if they all start to want to teach, or not necessarily teach, but at least infer against this, that's not going to scale up, I take it. What are the scaling options?
Yeah, then you would probably very quickly look at cloud hosters, where you say that either you get a VM that has GPUs attached, like larger GPUs, and then you deploy that VM and you run Ollama maybe on that single VM. But you could also look at dedicated inference providers where you have APIs that you choose a model that you want to run, and then they take care of loading that model into GPUs. They take care of that, and you really have you only worry about how many tokens do you generate, or do you want to generate, which models do you want to load, and then the service provider takes care of all of that for you. This would be for more advanced deployments. But this is also something that OpenAI, for example, is doing for their own models, right? This API that we've been talking about in the last episode, this is really only them running like a big inference deployment, and you pick which model you're interested in, and they will take care of running that.
Okay, so I guess I have several levels of paranoia here. on the least level of paranoia, I'll just go and use ChatGPT, and it's a free and open version, and I can be 100% sure that they will try to monetize my usage in one way they can, possibly, and likely will be using my information. And the other end of it, I have the model and everything running on a local machine that only I have SSH access to or similar. And then in between there is hosting a VM. I guess that is similar secure as on my own machine, because I guess that VM is still, even if it's running on a dedicated piece of hardware, it's still an encrypted communication to it. Then one level up or down in the paranoia level is dedicated data centers that run models and claim that they will not be using the knowledge in my models for anything. But I guess I can't be sure on that unless I take them to court and they show me their source code.
Well, the moment that you also rent a VM, you have a service provider with terms of service. So there is some trust there because this model of operations for that service provider is more established. But you will always have this question of the moment that you give hardware away and the moment that you give software away, can you trust the other side that's dealing with that?
Okay. Do you have anything that you can show me on setting up my own models?
Yeah, sure. So I have prepared our GPU server at KDAB to show you a few things with Ollama. I will not show you how to set all of that up. I will just show you how do you run Ollama and how would you get a specific model, and then how you set it up in Qt AI Assistant. And maybe as a quick refresher, we can start with this screen here, where we were using the GPT-4o model for most of the use cases in Qt AI Assistant. But I was using for co-completion for QML this Ollama 13b QML model. And this is a model that Qt Company has fine-tuned based on the Ollama model that Meta published. Okay, so now I want to show you how I had this set up in order to run. So I will be logging into the, so I'm already logged in these two terminal windows into our GPU server. And you also notice that here I have an environment set up. This is called genv, which is a GPU cluster manager that we're using to manage access and who uses which resources of the GPUs that we have available. Meaning you see that I am right now in an environment that offers me a GPU. And then I would just start Ollama. And I start Ollama, this is the executable. I started with an environment variable that says, please use this IP address and this, so this will be resolved in IP address, and use this port in order to run the service. And then serve means just run it as a service. So if I launch this now, Ollama is running. You see that it's accessing a GPU here. And that's that part. Then the other side is that I would need to download the model that Qt Company is providing. And I will do this here on the right-hand side in the terminal window, where I have, again, a command using Ollama. And this is Ollama pull, which means it's downloading a model. And the model that it's downloading is the model, the Qt Company /Ollama 13b -QML. And again, I need to tell Ollama, now in the left-hand side, I have a server running. So I now tell Ollama, the client, which IP address and port to use to connect to the server. So when I press enter now, you will see that it was trying to download the model. And when I say download, I mean that Ollama pull will not download the model to my file system here wherever I run this command, but it means that the server will start downloading a model and put it into its model cache directory. And you see this pulling was really fast because I had already pre-pulled the model so that we don't need to wait for this, but also this wouldn't take too long because you see here this is maybe 8 to 9 gigabytes of data.
This I see nowhere specifying a host for where to pull from. So there is a repository available to the whole world with lots and lots of different models, I think.
Yes, exactly. So this is a website that I would show you here. I have already prepared this. So this is on the ollama.com website where you can search for different models. And I already prepared the Qt Company so that you can see which models are available by the Qt Company. If I clear the search term, for example, this need a moment to update, but here you see that we can download the Gemma 3 model. There's also Mistral models available, and here's Llama 3.3 in the 70B version. So yeah, this is a repository of available models that work with the Ollama service.
Can you just type the Qt company back up there?
Sure.
I just want to validate what I saw there. So obviously I was slightly afraid of whether this whole series, everybody already knew what we're going to talk about, but 43 and 24 pools, it doesn't seem like the whole world is up to speed with this yet. So that's at least good news.
I hope for the YouTube series that when the series comes out, that the download numbers will increase significantly. Now that we're already looking at this, I want to point out a few more things here. You might have seen in one of the previous episodes that there was also a CodeLlama 70B model available that we could have used to chat with instead of using code completion, which these models are for. It seems that Qt Company hasn't published that model yet. At least I haven't found any reference to it where I could get it or download it. So it seems we're kind of stuck with these two smaller CodeLlama models for code completion. This is the one remark. And the other remark is that I won't show this here, but the moment that we have the model available in Ollama, we can interact with the model also without Qt AI Assistant. So I could now start Ollama in a chat mode and start chatting with the model. That would also work. So we are not restricted to Qt AI Assistant here.
Could you show me?
Yeah, let's see whether I didn't prepare that command.
And while Jan is preparing that command, let me just point out that, as always, do look in the comments below the video here. We will add a comment whenever we find the Qt company has uploaded that model for chatting. And I'm just trying to stall time for you, Jan. I hope it's going well here.
Yeah, I should be done now. So the problem is that I didn't have the name of the command on the top of my head. So here I have now set up Ollama run and then again the model name. So if I press enter here, it will need a moment to load the model into the GPU, and I could now ask it a question. My understanding is that the model is still trained, even though it's doing fill in the middle, it's still able to do a chat mode. So I guess we'll find out now. So let's see. Maybe I can just try this. Complete the following QML code, import Qt quick. Let's see whether what it will do. Okay. So you notice it's now started to generate a lot of Qt quick code that I'm not quite sure how it...
But it did not complete it.
It did not really complete it. Also, I was kind of hoping that it would say import Qt quick and continue the CK and then maybe a version number, but it was trained on Qt 6, so probably not the version number. It went for something else. I don't know. I don't know what prompted it to go down this road. I also want to point out that I did not use the model correctly. Because Qt Company has trained this to be a fill-in-the-middle model. So the expectation is that you would probably rather do something like the following, and this is really only conceptual because I don't know how exactly the model was trained to interact with this. But you would probably do something like fill at cursor, and then you would provide some code that says import cursor Qt quick, maybe. Or maybe we do it like this. And then you would hope that the model would generate code that is supposed to fit in at the excuse me. Is supposed to fit in at the position cursor. And I don't know what exact syntax it was trained on, so me trying now how this exactly would work out in the best way, this will be difficult. But I was mainly trying to show that you can interact with this model outside of Qt AI Assistant.
And I'm sure that your blood pressure is rising every second we're talking down this, but so I'll take you off the hot chair again. It was, but I imagine that this is useful for at least validating that your model is up and running and it can work and so on. I mean, it's not the interaction that you're going to do day to day. You'll be providing it somehow else. And I guess for extending this discussion slightly longer, if my aim wasn't to just do coding with these models. But if I wanted to have some AI into my own product, then this would be a good way to at least validate how the AI reacted to certain input before that certain input came from the product itself.
Yeah, you see me pausing and thinking about this because I want to say yes, and I'm going to say yes because yeah, you could chat with the model and see how it interacts with you depending on your input and the context that you provide. But if you want to publish this as a product, just chatting a little bit with the model should not be your main tool of verifying that a model actually behaves correctly. If you look at the research papers that, for example, that Meta is publishing when they describe how they trained the Llama models, then there is a whole section on verification and making sure that you cannot jailbreak the model and make it answer questions that it should not answer or exhibit like harmful behavior. So because this is trained out of models, and you would want to have a more rigid verification scheme than only having a little chat with it.
And of course, I knew all of that. I'm just the curious developer that has to ask these stupid questions. Or am I? Let's continue on here. Anything else that you have prepared for us in this episode?
Yeah, we need to close the loop. And the loop is that now I've shown you how this is set up in Ollama and that the Ollama server has the model available, but I haven't shown you how the setup in the KDAB system plugin works. So I would like to skip over to the settings, go again to the advanced section, and then I need to find the correct section here, which in our case will be this model, this setting down here. And you see that I'm referring to the API and the port number, and this is the API/generate. This is the API endpoint on the Ollama server that you can then use, or that the AI assistant tool then uses to connect to the server. And if you have this set up now, and then we jump over into again the QML code, this would mean that I can elicit here a prediction. Well, this is again, sometimes this doesn't like to behave as well. Now we have predicted that anchors probably is followed by a curly bracket. I would not have known
that. Good that we could wait 5 seconds for that prediction.
My years of being a QML trainer have not prepared me for this moment.
So I remember at some point you showing me the output on the console indicating that it actually did this prediction. No?
Yeah, I remember what you mean. So there is this general message tab here where a previous version of the AI assistant tool would be handing out information of what kind of completions it ran, but it looks like the current version doesn't do this in as much detail anymore.
Right. I'm just curious about the debugging of when I sit there 3 o'clock at night because I couldn't sleep and I didn't want to dream about you again. No. I don't know where that came from. But then I'm sitting there and I need to debug this stuff here and it gives me a completion. And then was that just the regular built-in to Qt Creator completion that came there? Was that because I forgot to shut down my other AIs that I was experimenting? Or is that really coming from over there? Of course, I guess I could go over there and close that down and see that it wouldn't give me that anymore. But how does it tell me something that, hey, I got a connection now from? Is that what you're showing me here?
Yeah, so what I want to show you now is that when you make a request, you can see it showing up in the Ollama log as a post request to the completions API.
Okay.
But what you were just pointing out is something that I actually struggled with when I was trying to prepare this episode. And that namely is that you can't really see whether there is a successful connection, whether the AI assistant plugin thinks that it connects to the correct API. And Ollama, for example, has multiple API endpoints, so it wasn't clear which one to use or which one to enter there. And debugging that was a bit difficult. So what I ended up doing in the end was that I instead of running an Ollama server, I ran a small TCP server just to record the message or the request that the plugin would be sending to Ollama so that I know which API endpoint it's going to use. And that way I could slowly figure out what the correct documentation is. Unfortunately, the correct configuration is, because unfortunately the documentation of the plugin isn't all too great.
What you're telling me here is that the communication protocol over the TCP connection isn't some binary blob. That's JSON or something else?
Well, it's just an HTTP API that uses JSON objects, yes.
Awesome.
Also, the fact that this is confusing is evidenced by me saying here that we are seeing access to the v1/completions API, but me also saying that this here would be the correct API endpoint to paste. But I was looking at the wrong part of the settings, and it's actually this one up here where you see the correct endpoint. So I'm very glad we figured this out now.
I will not try and understand what the other part further down is all about. I guess that comes from some older debugging you were doing and it's just left around.
The way that I understood it is that some of the configuration settings here direct requests via some of these endpoints, and the matching between the configuration and generals tab and in the advanced tab isn't perfectly clear to me.
Okay. I guess that's it for this episode? Question mark?
Yeah, I think so. I do think we showed a little bit the internal workings of KDAB Assistant. And then we can spend another episodes on looking a little bit past the horizon and see what else is out there.
That would be awesome. But next episode, I'd like to go back in time, like something like 25 years back in time or some such to my master thesis. And I will elaborate on how that fits into this whole thing. But well, tonight I'll be dreaming about all my old girlfriends 25 years back, I'm afraid. But I'll tell you more about that tomorrow. Until then, have a great time.
See you. Bye-bye.